when you pushed past maybe the resistance or the charge that seemed uncomfortable or that gave you anxiety, and you moved through it to only experience the other side of it, which was fulfilling and satiating and grounding. And so finding those little moments, recalling what those little nudges sounded like and felt like in your body is a good guess that that's the sound of your intuition. And I just really encourage everybody to get familiar with that, because it will then help in quite literally every decision or every part of your life from that point on.
Welcome to the Embrace and Expand podcast, where we talk about everything from spirituality, self-development, relationships, mindfulness, wellness, and everything that will help you embrace all that you are so you can expand into the best version of yourself. And welcome back to another episode of the Embrace and Expand podcast. Today we have a special episode. We don't have one guest, but two, with a wild and adaptogenic love story. So they were high school sweethearts who married very young, and after 3 years found themselves separated and eventually divorced, never thinking they would see each other again. Well, in 2018, they found themselves physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually at rock bottom. They each spent the next 3 years individually working on their own self-development journeys. Through their shared passion for the healing power of medicinal mushrooms, their paths crossed once again, and they are now on part 2 of their life together and more in love than ever before, co-creating a line of mushroom products called MushyLove. So it's a great pleasure to introduce you to Chase and Mimi. Thank you both for coming onto the Embrace and Expand podcast.
Wow, thanks for having us.
So glad to be here. Thanks a lot, Adam.
I am so fascinated to hear more about your guys' story because it really resonates with my wife and I's. We actually call it Marriage 2.0 that we're on now because we went through somewhat of a similar thing back in 2020. So for those of the listeners that aren't familiar with your story, and for myself as well that want to know a little bit more, why don't you guys take a few moments to just tell us kind of a bit about your backstory and what got you here?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll give you the abbreviated version. We have a long, like 2+ hour podcast where we go into all of the weeds and all of the details. But we'll kind of do the bullet points here, and really, like, it starts off with just having this really beautiful childhood romance. We've known each other since we were like 14, 15 years old. We dated through high school. We grew up in Washington State and in a community that was evangelical Christian. And so we were very much involved in church and went to a Christian school. We both graduated, and I went to a Christian college. And this community, although we weren't like practicing, was very much influencing the decisions we were making. And in those circumstances, before you start your adult life, before you live with a significant other, you are heavily encouraged, and I'm putting that nicely,
encouraged, expected,
to get married. And so we had this beautiful childhood romance. I mean, it's like Dawson's Creek level, like 90s kids living in the suburbs, middle class America, just the dreams. And it's summers at the lake, and it's long bus rides, playing high school sports together, where we just fall in love and have this relationship that's just so embedded in play and joy and presence, and we kind of sprint to marriage in this way. And even though we'd been together for 7 years as in a dating relationship, it really did feel, rushed in a lot of ways. And so we start our adult life. We moved to Seattle, Washington, and both start careers. I started a career in public accounting and finance, and was traveling all over the country on an airplane every Monday and Friday to kick off our marriage. And so we're, in our early 20s, we're starting marriage, we're putting on these adult hats for the first time. And that bedrock of play and joy and presence that was the nutrient to our childhood dating relationship would just slowly dwindled. And the distance between us as friends and romantic partners, much less husband and wife, just began to slowly get larger and larger and larger. And we get 3 years into this thing. And I pick up on the sense that something has to change. We both have become quite distant. And so I actually take an opportunity to get a promotion and move down to the firm that I was working for's office in Southern California. And I sort of make the executive decision that our family is going to be moving to San Diego, and that all of our problems will be solved. But it was actually at that moment, when we were quite literally on the cusp of moving to San Diego, that Mimi brought up that she wouldn't be going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was in this place where I was just completely disconnected from, any sort of center, any balanced version of myself. I was physically sick. I was mentally very sick. Had no real connection to spirituality, even though, I called myself a Christian. It was completely going through the motions. I just didn't feel connected to God in any real way. And I didn't feel connected to Chase. And we just didn't have the tools, communication skills, even ability to self-reflect and really like dig into like what stories are we telling ourselves that we need to sort through. Like just none of that felt available and reachable, or even known that we needed to do that. And so I came to Chase and I was very resolute, and I just said, I think you should still move to San Diego, but I'm not going. And it was sort of an ultimatum. It wasn't even like, hey, here's what I'm thinking, here's where I'm at. It was like, this is what's happening. And it was very cold and just distant from any sort of like connection to love. And so he moved down to San Diego. I stayed in Seattle, where I was working a very busy dental hygiene job. And so then we, had this basically separation, but that was about for 3 months until we, made it legal. And this was the first time that either one of us, we're adults and in the big cities, different cities, and figuring out what we want, and like dating as an adult, hadn't dated anyone since we were 15 years old, dating each other.
Yeah, I'd literally never kissed another girl. I was single at 26 years old for the first time, and it was just completely new terrain. And for both of us, I think it was this attempt at reclaiming something that had potentially been lost by our very long-standing childhood romance and relationship, and this lack of being able to individuate and this ability to evolve as an individual. And so we both just grasped at things that were very, very unfulfilling in that process.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that, we're focusing on external things as if they were going to, fill us and satisfy us internally, when we hadn't yet sort of peeled back the layers of the emotional trauma from our divorce and everything. And we both got to a point, we weren't speaking or texting or anything at this point, but we both got to a point around the same time where we were like, okay, we need to figure this shit out. Like, we got to figure something out. This isn't it. This ain't it. And so we started the work separately of sort of peeling back the layers and starting to ask new questions about ourselves, about our careers, about what we think about, spirituality, and sort of dug our claws into the world of self-development, as you stated in the intro. So we had a couple years of very intense, intentional self-development. And to make a sort of, long story short, we were dedicated to that self-development, not knowing that it would essentially lead us back together at some point. But we got to this point where we were able to be friendly, on Instagram, and we started DMing a little bit here and there.
Yeah, we'd both hit these individual health hellholes, we call them, these rock bottoms where we'd, divorced and pursued this external version of health that meant let's look as good as possible while also destroying our insides. And so we'd gotten to, what many would call like an adrenal exhausted state. And so we started both independently, not talking to each other, kind of scrubbing the world for holistic remedies, and stumbled upon adaptogenic medicinal mushrooms, and both just dork out on this so hard. I end up leaving my career in public accounting and finance. Mimi leaves her career in dental hygiene, and we both go into the holistic health space. I'm in kind of the startup world of nutraceuticals and supplements, and Mimi is starting a educational-based influencer business. Well, we sort of like hear through friends that we've both navigated to this very similar domain. And so it starts with just friendly dialogue, like, hey, check out these mushrooms that I'm taking. Yeah. Mimi had specifically found this very unique mushroom called ahcc, which we can talk about later. It's now something that we offer as a part of our business. But it conjured up this really authentic, genuine communication line. That then led to actually meeting up for the first time in 3 years back in our hometown one holidays of 2018. And we struck up this just beautiful friendship. And it was completely distant from any of the divorce or the pain or even anything historically. And we just actually found this new relationship that was kind of starting from ground zero. Only to then again meet up, or coincidentally meet up at this health conference in Anaheim, California in April or March of 2019. And we're like, oh, great, we'll hang out together as friends. We'll study medicinal mushrooms. This will be rad. By the third night of this expo, of this event, we found each other in Mimi's rental car, and we were digging up all the old stuff, right? This was actually being able to analyze what went wrong. Talking about the versions of ourselves that were not authentic, but ended up making this, decision to split up. Asking for forgiveness, saying sorry for the wounds that were caused, and ultimately this night in Anaheim, California, I grab her face, tell her that I love her, and kissed her, and it was just like absolutely incredible. And what I thought was just a friendship turned into this potential for a reconciliation romantically. And again, to put a long story short, if this is what you would call short, I guess, it was 6 months later that we were back together, ex-husband, ex-wife, dating, and Mimi had moved into my place in San Diego to kick off what we now call part 2.
It's such a beautiful story, and I think so incredible in how you both were able to recognize where the faults lied within each other, and where the paths were no longer being honoring each other, and were able to, one, make that decision to separate for the betterment of both of you, but then to also separately do the work and come back together and recognize that you both had a part to play in everything that transpired. And it resonates so deeply with my wife and I's relationship. And I've talked about this several times on the podcast, where we went through a similar thing, and it was during the 2020 COVID fiasco, and where very much we were living in a converted school bus, and so very small quarters, and had been living in it for a little over 2 years. And even though we were very close in proximity, we had become very distant from one another. And we're no longer honoring who we were as individuals and what we actually wanted to bring into the world and how we wanted to show up. And we ended up separating for 6 months. And just like you guys, we did the internal work separately and quickly realized that we both were at fault for everything that happened and transpired. And we're able to come back together and kind of go through the same thing as both of you, of recognizing that, okay, I had a lot that I did wrong. She had a lot that wasn't honoring who she was, and then thus not honoring who I was, and how we were both showing up for that relationship. So for anybody that's listening that maybe is experiencing something similar in your relationship or has separated, this is not necessarily to make you think that it's always going to work out the way that you want it to, but that it is possible to do the work necessary, both separately, but also while still in a relationship, to build something even more beautiful than what was there before, and be able to create a new life. Especially, I love that you guys call it part 2, because we call it marriage 2.0. And it's the philosophy of, we acknowledge what happened in the first version of our marriage, but we also acknowledge that that was the past, and not bring that into the current marriage. Would you guys agree that that was kind of a foundation for being able to build a new relationship off of, while acknowledging what happened, but also not bringing it into the present?
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
It's this idea that in order to have a future, we do have to go back to our past and address the past, but then we can't let the past ruin the future. And so it's this really interesting relationship between the past traumas of your life, and this can happen for people individually too, as they have family traumas and childhood issues and things of that nature. But in the domain of relationships, it's absolutely applicable as well. And so, forgiveness is one of those things that I think gets thrown around there. And at least the world that we came up through, it was this very transactional exchange of scorekeeping, and you're constantly scorekeeping in the relationships that you have. And when someone essentially owes you something
Or wrongs you,
the score is offset. And so forgiveness is essentially saying, all right, handshake deal, you said sorry, I'm gonna let you even the scoreboard here for now. And what we've worked through was actually to transcend this idea, this transactional scorekeeping game, we actually have to blow up forgiveness altogether. And
Yeah.
I'm less interested in a scorekeeping transactional perspective on which I exist and pursue relationships. I'd rather remove the scoreboard altogether. This is a game where there is no winner or loser. You just play.
Mm-hmm.
And so forgiveness was one of those huge things that we just had to be like, hey, this actually isn't even in the equation. We're stepping outside of the domain that includes the transactional game of forgiveness, and we're going to start something brand new. But then also having this master teacher of what went wrong in our relationship and what went right, because of so many of the things that we were unconscious of were the bright spots, were the lanes that were absolutely nutrients for us that we started to neglect as we put on our sort of husband and wife hat and forgot about what the bedrock of the relationship was: play, presence, no judgment, abundance, some of these things that we, for whatever reason, call it childhood programming or expectations on gender roles, and we just stepped into these completely different versions of ourselves when we put the husband and wife hat on. And so there's so much still to be learned. I mean, every conversation that we have about this thing, we pull on a new thread as it pertains to a lesson from that part one. But we are not interested. I have zero appetite for feeling as if I'm owed something or feeling as if I owe her something from quote unquote what went wrong in part one.
Yeah, I think that's such a great way of putting it. And I think acknowledging that, and I've never really looked at it this way as the scoreboard, but that is a perfect way of putting it, is to recognize that it's not about who has the most points or who is winning the game or who is losing the game. Because if one in a relationship is losing, you're both losing. If one is winning, you're both winning. And how can we come together as two whole individuals to create a beautiful thing together? Not that one is bringing more than the other or, vice versa, but to recognize that it takes both putting in their full 100% effort, not as I thought it was going into many of the relationships throughout my life, of that, it's okay, well, I'll bring 50%, they bring 50%, and we create 100%. Instead, it's more, you each bring 100% to the table and thus can create 300% out of that newfound relationship.
Yeah. And I think that's where, getting married so young in our early 20s, you learn so much about yourself through friendships, through romantic relationships, even through family interactions and everything, as you're coming out of college, finding jobs, finding new people, friendships, everything. The 20s is so full of just, it should be
fucking up and learning.
Yeah, exactly. And not that you can't get married young and have it work. We know plenty of people that have done that and do that, and that's great. But I think for a lot of people who are maybe feel a sort of societal or familial pressure to get married young, I think that a lot of that self-discovery is skipped over, and you jump right into a really sort of serious marriage relationship where you have bills and student loans and the stresses of adulting, which is really hard. And you can get to this point where it may not even be a conscious thought. I don't think it was for us. But deep down, there was somewhere where it was like, I don't even know who I am or what I really want, what my dreams are, what I really think about, all these big ideas, big topics. Deep down, that was never approached or addressed. And it was really hard to step into the relationship at 100% when we weren't even able to ask ourselves and do some sort of self-discovery. And then come into the relationship as that whole person, as we're talking about. So it was necessary in our case to have that time apart. Not that it was this separation and divorce was entered into in any sort of intentional or like highly spiritual, conscious way. It was reactionary.
And we never thought we'd talk to each other again.
No, it wasn't like, oh, let's work on ourselves and we'll see what happens. It was like, I think that, I made a mistake in marrying you and you're not my person and I need to go figure out my life and who is my person. Well, I think a lot of people can have that sort of attitude when you leave a relationship or you break up. It's like, oh, that just wasn't it. But if you don't address your part, your contribution to the breakdown, the disconnect, then those same problems are going to come up no matter who your partner is, no matter how beautiful and spiritual and conscious the relationship is. We all have our shit to work through. And it doesn't matter who you're with so much as like, okay, if you're not addressing that in yourself.
Yeah, I know you really hit on a great point, Adam, around this idea of like 100 plus 100 actually is 300. And it makes me think of this codependent idea. And codependency gets thrown around a lot in kind of the relationship space and the self-development space. And so it always bums me out when it becomes marketing and it kind of loses its power, but it really is an important arena to evaluate because we have such a groomed run to be codependent as human beings, and especially in young relationships. For instance, Mimi was my first girlfriend, and prior to that, my parents just kind of took care of me. I was literally like a teenager when we got together. And so I'd gone from codependency, which is very normal for a teenager to have with their parents.
You kind of have to be.
You kind of have to be. And then to relationship codependency over time, such that by the time we were married, it was just fully ingrained to have expectations of somebody else to meet certain needs in your life. And so it makes, you start out when you're kids, you're not really complete, mature human beings at this point. And so you tend to attract to a human being who can kind of fill the gaps, if you will. And so it mimics wholeness. And you've got this sort of really great cadence of relationship and the spark, right? This spark that has hit is so real and tangible. But human beings change, and they change pretty drastically in their 20s as they hit adulthood. And although the gaps kind of filled in and complemented each other at one point, are now exposed because of the way that you've both changed. And when you've been in relationship, when you've been in codependency, it's only natural to unconsciously start going, it's your fault. Why did you change? Mm-hmm. I had an expectation. Yep. I entered into this contract because you agreed to provide this thing that I was missing.
You said this is who you were.
Yeah, and obviously these aren't the things that are literally coming out of our mouth, but subconsciously this is how we're feeling, and thus this is what we're bringing to the dynamic of the relationship. So as both of us are in these adult hats in marriage and dealing with things, I'm dealing with the fact that I just jumped into a very intense career, and although I was making great money and had this perfect career path, I was like absolutely up against a brick wall of the fact that I had zero passion, did not like this was burning me out, and my vitality and my purpose, these things that are so critical to masculinity, was up in the air. And so I'm bringing that energy into the state of the relationship and wondering why my partner isn't helping me out with this to some degree. And similarly for Mimi, there were certain attributes, maybe it was, maybe along the lines of the way you looked or mm-hmm. the way that our relationship was going to look. But mm-hmm. but that was then brought in to the relationship, and it was easy to wonder why I wasn't filling those voids for you.
Yeah, I think a mistake that we made, a huge mistake that we made was, I'll speak for myself. When I was feeling disconnected from Chase, I made it about me, that there must be something wrong with me that he's not attracted to, connected with, doesn't want to be close with. I would tell myself these stories. And so then it was sort of this like flogging nature where it was like, okay, I'm not going to bother him. I'm not going to burden him with, the fact that I miss him and I'm not happy and these things. I just need to be better. I need to be a better wife. I need to be more supportive of what I thought was his dream, his career. And it wasn't. And if we were just authentically open and honest and had some basic communication skills where we could really share with each other how we were feeling in a way that our partner could digest, these feelings would come out, but they would come out as a fire hose or a volcano after pushing them down for so long. And that's not healthy either. And so that was definitely something that I struggled with, was learning how to, I never really did in our marriage, learning how to use my voice in a loving, authentic way that actually could bring us closer, connect us, reconnect us, instead of telling myself a story that it must be connected to my worthiness that we're feeling disconnected. And so then that makes me want to pull away even more. It's just like a hamster wheel that you can't see when you're on the wheel.
Yeah, it really takes like stepping off of the wheel and watching all of your shit spin on it to be able to see like where you were projecting onto the other person, maybe things that already existed within yourself from your own childhood. And I'm speaking of my own experience of growing up in a family where I didn't really feel free to necessarily 100% voice my opinions and what I truly felt for fear of being ridiculed or for fear of getting yelled at or for fear of being wrong. And so I then brought that into all of my relationships of, well, if I just don't say anything and I don't ruffle the other person's feathers, then everything's just going to be okay. But it was in the not saying anything that led to the demise of marriage 1.0.
Yes.
That not actually voicing to my wife, Rachel, that, hey, like, I'm not feeling seen here. I'm not feeling supported in the way that I need to. But it also, for me, took that separation period and living by myself in a small studio apartment above my parents' garage in my 30s and having to like be like, wow, so this is where my life has led me to. And now I'm having to do all of my own dishes, all of my own laundry, cook for myself, plus still work. It gave me the appreciation for everything that she did for me that I didn't show appreciation for in marriage 1.0. And even this afternoon, I just walked up to her as she was cooking lunch and just told her like how much I appreciate all of the things that she does for our family and everything that she does, even when she's tired and even when she's got a lot on her plate, because she's taken that on as that's just what she's going to do, because she knew that I was working on editing another podcast before I jumped onto this one. And then I've got another call. And so it's like, I don't have the time to be able to disconnect. So she shows up in that way. And same thing, being able to recognize when she's got a lot on her plate. So I've got to show up a little bit more and take up some of that slack instead of taking the, way that our parents kind of showed of like the wife does all of the maternal duties and the father is the one that earns all of the income and does all of the outside chores and nothing bridges. It's like you have these separate roles that no, the father can't vacuum or do the dishes or make dinner. And when really we're a team, we have to be able to do everything together. And sometimes you have to pick up the slack where the other one doesn't have the capacity to be able to do that. And I don't think we would have gotten there if it wasn't for that separation, if it wasn't for the big blow up that we ended up having that led us to having to do that deep internal work.
Yeah.
Totally resonates.
We often, it's funny because it was the most painful thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. Yet it was also this like absolute hack for my own development and for what is now the prospering relationship that we have. But I don't encourage everyone to just like get a divorce, obviously. And so I think there are ways to, microdose the breakup, if you will. And I think that just it starts with a foundation of resetting expectation. And the only expectation that you could probably comfortably have is that your partner is going to change and your significant other is going to change. And you can either resist that or you can get deeply curious as to who they are today, how they're changing today, and whether or not you are changing with them or in another direction, but with some level of openness to bring that diversity to the table and create from a space of constantly getting to know one another and the newer versions of themselves. And so really simple stuff like, we really encourage consistent check-ins, both for relationship management. Let's, fix the roof when the sun is shining.
It's the oil change.
It's the oil change, but also for when there is a need to have a more serious, intense, potentially charged conversation, you can set a container to have it in. And so like routine check-ins, we've got a framework for it that we use and we encourage, many others to do to start implementing, immediately. And it's even just good, like when there's nothing charged to be talked about, you actually unearth amongst yourselves things that are changing and are kind of pivoting in the way that you might see something or the way that you want to engage in something. And it allows for this consistent sort of path forward towards getting to know this person at a new level. And there's other things we would encourage too, but I definitely don't think that just like everybody should try on breaking up with their significant other. If there are steps that can be taken to start
Yeah.
nurturing the relationship in the right direction.
Yeah, and that's the point of why we share our story and what we talk about on the Medicine Podcast is, in hopes that people can hear our story, hear what we're doing now that's working in part 2, in hopes that they can dodge some of the bullets that hit us without necessarily breaking up or divorcing. Sometimes that is the answer, but there's no way that, someone on a podcast can tell you that, right? Like, obviously you have to listen to your intuition and do what's best for the situation. But what we're not saying is everybody should just separate or divorce to figure their stuff out. There is a way to do it alongside each other if that's what both of you want. And that's the key. It has to be, like bought in from both people. Like, yes, we're in this. I am devoted to figuring this out with you. And on kind of piggybacking on Chase's explanation of the check-ins, I think something I just want to highlight is that the check-ins, like an absolute must, is that there is a feeling of safety, and that the point of the check-in is for both of you to grow together, to contribute, to make a deposit into the relationship bank, rather than just an opportunity to tell your partner all the things that they're doing wrong. So we have this very specific framework where it's cushioned with things that we're doing right, things that you're doing right, things that I'm doing really well. And then you bring in like, hey, here's what I would love more of. And that language is specific because it's like, it's putting it back onto your experience. Here's what I would love more of from you, not you're doing this wrong or you're doing this bad and it needs to change. It's not that. It's co-creative. It's a co-creative, very safe container.
Yeah, it's a trigger-free zone.
Yeah.
Do not intentionally push on a trigger, but be aware of what is triggering you and just refrain for that time period. Yeah.
So many good nuggets that you guys touched on there, but I'm really, really thankful that you're bringing up that point of the safety within the container of being able to share with one another, because it doesn't always feel comfortable or safe to voice the things that are on your heart, that are heavy, that you feel like you may be judged for. But when you can say it in such a way that it's not trying to put blame on the other person for not providing what you feel you're not receiving, but to also fully accept that that is a fundamental need. And if that need is not getting met, it does need to get voiced. And to be able to recognize that if you don't voice that need, we're not mind readers. There's no way that anybody is going to know that you need something if it's not actually voiced. And that was a huge fault of mine, was just not voicing what I actually needed in the relationship. And once I finally was able to voice that, it felt really good. It felt so good to get that weight off of my shoulders, to share with Rachel that this is what I actually need moving forward. And to have her also meet me there and say, like, I have no problem giving that to you, but I had no idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oftentimes we put our partner through tests that they don't know that they're taking. And like, maybe they get it right by some miracle, but that's really unfair to the partner. And we tell ourselves this story, at least I did in part 1, if Chase really loved me, he would know, or he would just figure it out, or he would know that I'm hurt, or he would do X, Y, Z if he really loved me. We make it so dramatic. And it's like, the reality of the situation was he was dealing with his own traveling, adrenal exhaustion, his own like conflict of like career stuff. I was making it about me, and it wasn't about me. And, I wish now that I could go back and do it differently. But of course it's done, and we're learning from it. And I'm ultimately grateful for our experience. But yeah, it's so easy to put your partner through tests that they don't know they're taking.
Yeah. And I also want to take a little bit of a rewind on you guys talking about the fact of being open to your partner changing. Because I think it's very easy to be so focused on everything that's going wrong in a relationship that you don't actually give your partner the capacity to change. That you put this blanket statement over them that, oh, well, they're never going to change. They've always done things this way, so it's always going to be that way. And I was the one that was very much on the spiritual path early on in our marriage. And I would constantly try and get my wife to meditate, get her to do some of these practices with me, come to a Reiki share with me when it wasn't anything that she was interested in at the time. But it was in us both doing the internal work that she found her own ways and her own practices. And now every single morning we sit down, we work with our cards, we journal together. We've now started a new practice where we're both reading self-development books early in the morning. Now we are both back to doing these spiritual practices together and having this forward momentum. And we both are very, very different people than when we first got together. I mean, we met each other at the bar, at one of my friends' houses, and then she drove us to the bar. And we spent the first several years just as friends before we started dating. And it was always drink in hand or that. And now I haven't drank alcohol in over 8 years. It'll be 9 years in October. She drinks very infrequently. And so our lives are just completely different in how we actually show up, what our interests are. And so I find that even more intriguing to be in a relationship, knowing that you're not actually going to be with the same person for the rest of your life. You're going to be with a different person every so often. And that's what should make it enticing to continue to grow together in a relationship.
Yeah. Isn't that beautiful? Like, and similar for us, I started to leave Christianity in college, and I'd kind of just gone through the motions. I'm a pretty skeptical person altogether, and had by the time I got to college, I had chosen that I'm not into this. I definitely don't buy Christianity. And while it wasn't a problem when we were dating, it began to be a problem when we were married and we were even thinking about future family and kids. And I had gone into full-blown scientific materialism, and I had gotten very interested in the world of psychedelics at this time. This is like early 2010s and kind of on the cusp of this, renaissance pertaining to psychedelics. And but any sort of connection to a higher power, prayer, meditate, it wasn't even a 5 seconds of thought over the course of a month or maybe even a year for us in our relationship. Yet a connection to the divine, if you want to call it that, or our great purpose, or this metaphysical nature, or God, is such a critical pillar of what constitutes, the vitality of our relationship now. And that exploration into, what is this? What is our purpose? Who is God? Is such a nutrient for the relationship now. And although, now both of us are not associated with Christianity in any way, we can look back on some of the really incredible attributes of that religion or that faith that have served us well and have kind of developed certain muscles, whether it be for sound healing or even just the act of prayer and gratitude, that we're able to now look at things that, maybe were painful or maybe caused a charge previously, or were just uninteresting in certain lanes altogether, now are such a part of what makes the exploration into why we're here, what we're doing, how do we connect with love and purpose and the infinite, just so fun for what the relationship is now.
It's so beautiful. And I think that also brings up the point of where you can have very different interests at one point in time and have them change.
Yeah.
But in having them change, you give your partner the opportunity to see a different perspective. And through that different perspective, it allows them to either hop on board or choose that, no, I don't really agree with that, and still give you the freedom to be able to choose your own paths in whatever way that looks like. And I think it's beautiful that you guys brought your passions for what you found separately together to create this beautiful product that I'm sipping on right now, which is like a liquid cinnamon roll in a cup. It's your guys' descriptions of it is so perfect. So I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about your guys' adaptogenic journey. And really, Chase, I'm guessing you probably were the one, since you just stated, you got into the psychedelic realm and really more of the science behind a lot of this stuff early on. That Mimi, did that kind of spark the interest in you before you guys made the separation and went on your own journey, or is that something that you found independently on your own?
Psychedelics, you mean?
Or psychedelics, or even just adaptogenic medicinal mushrooms.
Gotcha. Yeah, we definitely were not talking about psychedelics when Chase was, listening to these different Joe Rogan, Aubrey Marcus podcasts. We weren't discussing them whatsoever. It was, not something to go towards in Christianity. It was kind of like, what is that? It's just under this umbrella of like drugs, so it's bad. So we weren't talking about it. But I actually discovered my love and slight obsession, you could call it, for the category of mushrooms, in this case, medicinal mushrooms, when I was a dental hygienist, and I was also on my own like physical body healing journey. I was having some really major health issues. Never had a diagnosis, but I know now it was just self-induced under eating, over exercising to like have some control in my life. And I did this for years, and I really got to a place where I was making myself very sick. So as I started to really ask the question, like, okay, what is real health? I look good in the mirror, I look good in a swimsuit, but I feel awful. What is going on? And as I started to listen to more like real health podcasts, not just fitness, but focusing on real health, I, kept hearing about these things: reishi, chaga, lion's mane, cordyceps, and hearing from, things like Four Sigmatic was really up and coming. And so I started to just get curious about it, started ordering some of the products. And it definitely sparked. I won't say that it absolutely just changed my health overnight. It was more of a progression, but that's where it started. And then where I really dug in for myself as an educator was as I was a dental hygienist. I was interested in mushrooms, the ones that I just explained. And then I had this patient in our office who basically was, I don't know, in her 50s or something, and got diagnosed with HPV. And she said that her naturopath recommended this mushroom to help clear HPV out of her body. And it worked. And so I was immediately intrigued, like, what is this mushroom? I have to know. Is it reishi? Is it chaga? What is it? And she had said it was this mushroom product called ahcc. And I was like, what? That's not a mushroom. So I go on Dr. Google and I look it up. And of course, it is a real thing, and it has its own research association. And I start just diving into this world. I'm like, if this is a potential answer for HPV, I got to know what this thing is. And I just kept learning. I ordered the product for myself because it was so helpful for just supporting the immune system, supporting the entire physiology. So I was like, I got to get this in me. Ordered textbooks. I started reading, research papers, and I just basically became obsessed over this thing and started telling patients about it when they would come in with different issues. And I probably was a broken record, and I probably was, sort of pushy and annoying sometimes, but I was really, passionate about this. And that was one of the ways that Chase and I actually reconnected. Was he saw that I had left dental hygiene, fast forward a couple years, I had left dental hygiene. I had enrolled myself into the Academy of Culinary Nutrition, where we learn about how food is really our medicine, how food can be medicine. And I created this ahcc food that I started selling on the internet, selling on Instagram, and sort of overnight became an entrepreneur, kind of on accident. And so I started, talking to Chase about what I was doing, about ahcc, because he had never heard of it. And it really opened the door to like, whoa, you're really obsessed with this. Okay, like this is really cool. And it started the conversation for us to connect over our love for these very powerful adaptogens. So that's how it started with me.
Yeah, and it actually worked really well because in my health journey, I discovered this really similar mushrooms to what Mimi was describing: cordyceps, reishi, lion's mane, and I was just all in. I'd been helping a brand really get off the ground and sell some of these products or some of these medicinal mushrooms in their products. And when we actually got back together, we were both like, God, this is it's like the mascot for our relationship, this adaptogenic medicinal mushroom. And right as we had gotten back together, Mimi actually had decided to travel all the way to Japan to research this specific mushroom supplement, ahcc, met the growers of the mushroom, like literally met every single person in the supply chain, and had gotten to this point where she was going to be able to develop this and offer it as a capsule product for like therapeutic use, which is like it's a very rare mushroom, and it's a derivative off of shiitake mushroom that has all of these just incredible benefits. And so it was at that point, as we engaged in building a podcast business together, also started offering ahcc. It's called Immune Intel ahcc as a part of like the podcast launch and her growing social media business. And it's been really taking off since. I mean, thousands of people are consuming this and seeing just mind-blowing results. Obviously we can't make like aggressive claims, but there are people whose feedback as it pertains to treating HPV, supporting with cancer diagnoses, even like Lyme disease, and also like just a robust immune system response that has been more important than ever over the last 3 to 4 years. And so this was really kind of the beginning of our mushroom passion together. And it's evolved to include a little bit of a sexier product, something that we've been dying to create for a while that we ended up creating last year called MushyLove Latte. And that's what you have there, Adam. It's a caffeine-free, delicious medicinal mushroom latte with 500 milligrams of chaga mushroom, 500 milligrams of tremella mushroom, which is the beauty mushroom. It's great for hydration and digestion and skin support. And we've created this thing with utmost intention and love. It's got over a gram of mushrooms, which is actually quite rare if you've consumed coffee or mushroom elixirs in the past that are usually putting about 250, maybe 300 milligrams of mushrooms in there. But we put a whole whopping gram in this thing and try to make it taste as good as possible without garbage sweeteners. So MushyLove is definitely our baby. We've put a ton of love and thought into it.
Well, I can definitely tell that it was a labor of love for you guys to put this product together, because I've tried a lot of medicinal mushroom products over the years, and just like it says on your guys' website, not everything should taste like mud. And it's not all of the mushroom products that are out there are clean. It's I think a lot of people don't really understand that there's a lot of marketing hype that goes into mushroom products. And I even found myself, I was taking a lot of Paul Stamets mushroom products for a while, only to realize that most of his mushroom products are all mycelium and grain. So you're actually not even getting any of the benefits of the fruiting body from the mushroom whatsoever. And I was like, well, can it even be called a mushroom product at that point in time? Because if you're not actually getting the mushrooms, what benefit is it really giving you versus the quality of components that you guys and ingredients that you put into your product is very much, not only does it taste good, but it feels good within the system. You don't get any of the side effects that you can get sometimes with a lot of the grains that go into those products. So I can at least attest to just trying so many different things. And I actually started creating my own blend of I found a really high quality organic mushroom component that was 7 different mushrooms. It's chaga, reishi, lion's mane, cordyceps, shiitake, miyake, and turkey tail. And then I added ashwagandha and astragalus and turmeric, and just kind of blended my own stuff. And then I would add a little bit of vanilla protein to help kind of flavor it nicely. But the quality of product that you guys have cultivated, you can tell that it was done with intention. You can tell that it was done with love. And not only love in just for the mushrooms themselves, but also the love in wanting to share that with everybody.
Wow, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. We received that feedback. That was absolutely our intention. We like to say MushyLove is highest quality mushrooms and highest quality love.
And we totally understand the nuance in the mushroom world. That was something that we'd stumbled into a few years back as well. There's this debate between the mycelia and the fruiting body, and where we've landed on that is similar to you. If when it comes to the mushroom extracts or the mushroom products that we want to consume, we'd like to know if it's 100% mushroom or if it's got some sort of growing medium attached to it and it's just been dried and powdered. And that's nothing against mycelium. Mycelium is amazing, and it actually arguably itself has some unique qualities that are, maybe even superior or more efficacious than that of the fruiting body. The tough part is to actually extract the mycelium is a significant undertaking. These little roots are just like dangly, right?
Microfilaments, yeah.
And so mycelium is actually the ingredient that is in ahcc, active hexose correlated compound. It's actually shiitake mycelium, but this is a patented process for finding the most efficacy as it pertains to the mycelium itself. And so you could probably describe some of the processes when it comes to producing and manufacturing ahcc in its capsule form, but there is this like very long, intensive process for extracting the shiitake mushroom mycelium that has all of these wild benefits.
Yeah, so the ahcc is made from the mycelium of shiitake, but the way that they do it, just like Chase said, is a patented process where they're using a whole facility. They've got these tanks that the liquid goes into, and it churns and ferments, and it's a very specific, unique, patented process that is not the same as company mushroom XYZ that's growing shiitake mushrooms on, say, oats or barley or rice. And, maybe one or two mushrooms sprout up. They dry it and just grind everything together and encapsulate it. That is completely different. ahcc is it's in a class of its own because of this patented process. So there's a lot of education that goes into ahcc and how it's different from other mushrooms. We don't want to demonize any part of the mushroom because they all have their benefits. It really comes down to the manufacturing process and how it's treated, and then how it's encapsulated, and how the end product is provided to the consumer, where a lot of these brands are using that mushroom type language, and really what the consumer is getting in the end product is very expensive oats or rye or rice with a little bit of mushroom sprinkling. That's not ahcc. ahcc is really in a class of its own.
Yeah, we definitely tell people to, if you're just consuming mushrooms in like supplement form, you get it at your GNC or at your organic market or online, look for 100% mushrooms. You can look on the ingredient list of most, and if it has something besides mushrooms in it, it'll say something like myceliated biomass, or it'll say oats or some other grain that's included in the ingredients. If it's mushrooms, it'll just say fruiting body mushrooms. A lot of times they'll call out the fact that it's fruiting body. And unless you can find kind of a unicorn like ahcc is, that can back up with integrity and transparency when it comes to the formulation process, that says this is a myceliated product that has, superior efficacy and manufacturing quality, I would really steer clear of just kind of the mixed mushroom various supplements. Nothing against Paul Stamets. The guy is a pioneer for sure.
He is.
But we point people towards, if you're not going to take mushrooms in our product, which has a gram of mushrooms, arguably as much as you'll find really anywhere else. Real mushrooms, we know them well, great friends. They also sell really, really high quality fruiting body extracts.
Thank you for going into really that clarity around the extraction process and differentiating between, I think it does a lot of marketing terms and a lot of companies jumping on the medicinal mushroom bandwagon with really being more in alignment with just trying to make profits versus trying to create a medicine. And I think that's a big distinction that many people just aren't aware of. And of course, no companies are going to come out and say that, it's mostly just a bunch of grain that you're buying in these little pills with a very minute amount of mushrooms. But at the end of the day, if we're really trying to capitalize on the benefits that Mother Nature is trying to give us with these beautiful medicines, we do have to do kind of our own research and due diligence to find these companies like yours and like you just noted, real mushrooms of that are doing the research to making sure that the products that they're providing are of the utmost quality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't even mention that, speaking to your point, which is great about these sort of this fad, this trend of the health and wellness space. And over the last 10 years, I would say, mushroom companies popping up everywhere and jumping on the bandwagon. AHCC has been around since the late 80s, and these Japanese researchers really dug into the clinical research right away. They started clinical research right away. So AHCC is actually the most clinically researched specialty immune supplement in the world, and it has over 30 in vivo human clinical trials to back it up. So it's a really we call it the mushroom unicorn, but I wanted to mention that just because it's not a new thing, even though a lot of people haven't heard of it. It's just not easily marketable. There's a lot of education that goes around it. Something like the name active hexose correlated compound, it's not easy to remember. And so we've had some hurdles in, really getting it out there and educating on it. It's not easy to remember all these things, but it's so potent and powerful and helpful for people who are on a healing journey. That is like, it's in me now. I can't stop, really.
Well, it's palpable, the passion that both of you have for these medicinal mushrooms, and just goes to show the amount of research that you both have individually done to really get to those answers, but to also get to those answers from multiple different sources, and to actually go to the source in Japan to see the facility, see how the extraction process is done, to know that this really is the best quality product that probably is out there, I would say, to be able to help in so many different ways. And I think we're probably just beginning to scratch the surface really on the benefits that all of these medicinal mushrooms have, because there's a lot of research that has been done, but not nearly as much as pharmaceuticals and things like that. So I think as more and more companies start to do this research, we're going to just find so many more benefits that they'll bring to the table.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think, we both have shirts that say mushrooms will save us. And I think that's maybe not just mushrooms, but really the thing behind the thing there is like us getting back to nature and to these healing modalities that have been around for thousands and thousands of years, that we just need to embrace more of what makes us human, what makes us connected to nature. And I think that we are going to have so much more success in healing different things than looking to a pill or a medication or a doctor to heal us. Like taking the radical responsibility to try on some of these other more natural, ancient healing modalities. I think that there's a lot of room for.
Yeah, I'm convinced that there's a mushroom for everything, and I think that as more time goes on, we're realizing that, and even some of the now what seems to be mainstream takeaways for the benefits of psychedelics, even and psilocybin specifically in the mushroom world. I've worked in the nutraceuticals supplement space for a while now, and I know what it takes to get a product to the marketplace. And by the time you see it on the shelves or on Amazon or on some website, it has crossed or had to cross so many thresholds. Some of them being it has to be affordable to manufacture, produce, such that you can sell it and make a profit. That's just the way that capitalism works. It has to be marketable. AHCC is a really hard word. It's a very long, expensive process to produce, as we talked about. It's dealing with the mycelium, the delicacy of these little root structures of the mushroom, and so it's an expensive process to extract these benefits from it. Then it's got this huge name. There's a reason this product isn't on the shelf everywhere, and it's not a household name, despite its clinical research. It's because it hasn't passed some of these mainstream business thresholds.
Mm-hmm. Even though it's used in over 1,000 cancer clinics worldwide, research organizations, teaching hospitals all over the world, it's not so consumer mainstream, which is where I came in, and I was like, I gotta share this with people. People have to know that this thing exists.
And I'm convinced that there's more out there. There's more that haven't, crossed these thresholds of affordability, sellability, profitability, and marketing ability with its name or some other. You'll see a lot of times the name of these mushrooms that have been around for thousands of years is drastically different than what they look like when they're actually on the package. For instance, I forget what tremella is called, but it's like a name that you would never ever put on a package. It's
Tremella
like
fusiformis.
Fusiformis. Yeah, fusiform is not quite a salesy buzzword.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really enjoy that you guys touch on the coming back to nature, and that nature really is providing us with all of the answers to all of the problems. And it makes me think to the huge oil spill that happened in the Gulf of Mexico years ago, and at how some of the researchers that were out there found that there were mushrooms that were growing that were literally eating away at the oil in the oil spill. And it just proves that Mother Nature knows best. Like, as intelligent as we think we are as the human species, we will never be able to replicate or recreate what she is able to do naturally. And I did another podcast recently where the woman was talking about it, how you can overlap the Lyme disease map and the map for Japanese knotweed. And they literally follow themselves exactly because Japanese knotweed is a remedy for Lyme disease. And so, again, it's a case in point that Mother Nature is always going to provide us the medicine that we need. And years ago, I read the book by Terence McKenna called Food of the Gods, and he called it the archaic revival, and how we are coming back to these ancient indigenous teachings where our ancestors lived with the land. They knew what plants and mushrooms were good to eat, what were medicine, what were poisonous but could be taken in micro dosing that still would become medicine. And it's beautiful that there's individuals like yourselves that are really bringing this wisdom back into a modern age and helping to educate people that you don't just have to take a pill in order to help heal yourself, but instead you can change your diet. You can add some supplements that are very natural, that weren't created in a lab, that can actually give you all of the healing that you need without having to have any of the side effects that go along with modern medicine.
Yes, exactly.
Well, you touched on the embracing a little bit, so I'm going to take that as a perfect segue to ask you both, Chase and Mimi, what did you have to embrace in your life in order to expand into the person you are today?
Yeah, I can start.
I have
on
mine
this
too.
one. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I could say so many things. This could be a whole podcast again, but I would say the overarching thing that I have been invited to embrace is the unknown in order to expand. And that is true in my spiritual life. Growing up Christian, I knew the answers. I knew the 10 Commandments. I knew the Bible. I knew Jesus, but it wasn't working for me in my life. I wasn't connected to it anymore. And so embracing the unknown of, well, if God isn't this, what is God? And that can be scary. The unknown, certainly in our relationship, getting into part 2, I was like, people don't do this. Is this even an option? Like, is this even possible for us? There was so much unknown. Am I going to move? What am I going to do for work? There was so much unknown. And I would say unknown, as we step into business together, as we're building a business and a brand and products together, there's so much unknown there. Certainly the future is unknown, but I know that every time I have embraced the unknown, still connected to my heart, my center, and my intuition, I have only expanded. So my answer would be the unknown for sure.
Love that. Yeah, for me, there's similarly, there's many, but the one that comes up is my value and my worth is not equivalent to how much I can achieve or produce. I was a college athlete. I was a very involved athlete really throughout my youth. And outcome and performance driven and achievement based are, typically some ways that you would describe, especially my first 20, 30 years of life. And I'm still working through and having to embrace the fact that my worth and my value is not those things that I achieve or produce. And that's been one to really put a challenge in for me, as far as just separating myself. Like, who am I without my achievements? And that it's a slippery slope for me, because I will convince myself that I like something just because I'm getting feedback that I might be good at it, or that someone likes the work product that I've put forth, or the achievement that I've been able to accumulate. And even if I was miserable in that process, I might be able to sort of trick myself into thinking that that's my purpose or my passion, just because the end result was good by somebody else's terms. And so coming back to this place of distancing myself from those things externally, that I've, the proverbial like trophy case, where I'm identifying myself with what's in the accomplishments bucket. And I'm really curious now at 33 years old to sit in this spot of being disconnected from those things that have been achieved, and just deeply meditating on, and out of curiosity asking myself, hey, what like quite literally gives you purpose and vitality and joy now? And so it's definitely something I'm in the middle of, but that's what comes up for me.
Such fantastic answers. And I love this question so much, because the answers that come up are so unique to each individual person and their unique path. And yet, every single time somebody answers that, I feel resonance to that answer as well, of experiencing similar things on my journey. And it's a case in point that I've mentioned many times on this podcast, is that it doesn't matter what path we all have walked. We all have so much more in common with each other than truly what we have in differences. And what it really comes down to, and what truly matters in life, is to honor who we are as a unique, authentic expression in this world, and just to try to show up as that. Not to try to put all of this extra weight on our shoulders of, case like you said, of having to be super productive or constantly be crushing it and, be the latest and greatest, biggest thing, but to find fulfillment in even the minute periods of time in life. And just find fulfillment in just being who we actually are.
Yeah.
Yep. Well said.
Snaps for that.
Well, as we are kind of nearing up, I'm sure we could continue to talk for hours on end, but what would be one last piece of advice you both would give to the listeners if they really resonated with what you had to say, if they want to take a deeper dive down the adaptogenic journey, or even just to expand within their own relationship with self?
I would say, I'm just going to say the first thing that popped into my head, I think that everyone can do to find more fulfillment and joy in their life is to find more pleasure in the small things. Like you mentioned, like this is so simple, but it's so simple that it gets overlooked. And I think something that we can all do is taking time to be present in what is right in front of you, whether that's a walk, whether that's a conversation with your partner. Find more pleasure in the small things, in your morning walk, listening to the birds, feeling the sunshine on your cheek. Just take an extra second in these activities to feel those feelings, to experience what that situation, whatever that is, has to offer you in the form of pleasure, things that literally like add and nourish your being. Shoving your face into a rose and just inhaling its scent, or even like thanking the rose, like, wow, thank you so much for your beauty and your scent. Like, it just added to my life. Like, I'm that weirdo that talks to roses. But I think that we can all find little moments, so many more moments of pleasure that over time accumulate and add to this feeling of like, I am extracting all of the magical juice out of my life on purpose.
Yeah, I love that. For me, I would say developing a relationship with your intuition and getting familiar with the sound of your intuition or your soul or your higher self, however you want to define that. And we've worked through that a lot. Our teacher, friend, mentor, Paul Chek, it's kind of the foundation of his entire curriculum, and that's been a evolving relationship, but it's one that's really, when I can truly hear it and listen to that nudge of my own intuition, really doesn't lead me astray, even if it's like an uncomfortable decision or a choice.
Oftentimes it is.
Sometimes it's not a fluffy feeling of butterflies and rainbows. It's actually comes with a charge and comes with a level of maybe anxiety or some level of challenge. And but there's something about nurturing that relationship, whether that just be in stillness and silence, and or it's reflecting on those moments where you did listen to this intuitive nudge and really sitting back into that space and getting familiar with what it sounded like in your body and in your psyche when you pushed past maybe the resistance or the charge that seemed uncomfortable or that gave you anxiety, and you moved through it to only experience the other side of it, which was fulfilling and satiating and grounding. And so finding those little moments, recalling what those little nudges sounded like and felt like in your body is a good guess that that's the sound of your intuition. And I just really encourage everybody to get familiar with that, because it will then help in quite literally every decision or every part of your life from that point on. And so that's definitely what I would leave people with. And if this is interesting, this type of dialogue is interesting at all, we chat about this kind of stuff all the time on our show, the Medicine Podcast. Every Monday we drop an episode. We have the two of us that talk often, and it's just the two of us. Then we have a guest every other week. If you're interested in adaptogens and mushrooms, we have a newsletter called the Medicine Drop. And every single week, we actually give away a product from one of the brands we're affiliated with, or our own products.
And we use all these brands ourselves.
Use all the brands ourselves. So yeah, we would love to see folks and hang out with anybody. We're really open on social media as well. Both our Instagrams are open door policy when it comes to direct messages.
Yep.
Wonderful. And I'll make sure to have, as always, all the information in the show notes below so you guys can easily contact Chase and Mimi. You both are such a wealth of knowledge and information. I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast and just sharing your story and really bringing this medicine back to the world the way that you are.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
For having us.
So thank you everyone for listening to another episode of the Embrace and Expand podcast. Again, I'll have all the information in the show notes below so you can easily contact Chase and Mimi, find out about more of their products, get a bag of the MushyLove yourself so you can taste what it's like to have a cinnamon roll in a cup. Appreciate you being here, and I'll catch you on the next one.